Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Let's talk about the foot again in
Okay.
the gait cycle. And I liked what you were saying about the center of mass in the foot.
You mean as somebody walks? As the So there's a difference between center of pressure and center of mass and center of gravity. Those are three separate things.
Hmm.
Okay. So center of gravity or center of mass is the position on your body where all your mass is said to be concentrated. And so if you were to stick a pole in your body at the center of mass, where the point about which you would be balanced is your center of mass. Okay.
And this can change. This is not an anatomical thing. Like our position, we're in relation to our center of mass, right?
Yes. And if you bring your hands up over your head, that's going to raise your center of gravity or
Yeah.
center of mass.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can play with our center of mass.
Yes, yes, definitely. Now the projection of your center of mass to the ground is your center of gravity. So where that dot is on the ground, right underneath your center of mass, is your center of gravity. And then center of pressure, the technical term is the centroid of forces applied to the sole of the foot. Okay, but what it really is that if you were to take all the forces that are acting on your foot and concentrate them in one particular spot, that then you trace that. That's where that path of what people call force, but it's really pressure, passes along the sole of your foot. So when people make contact with the ground, they're if they are heel strikers, then the heel strikes, the center of pressure will break a little bit towards the medial border or the big toe side. Then it'll break to the lateral border, come along the lateral border, and then you want it to come off between your big toe and your second toe as you push through and move on to your next step. Now, why is that important? Because the foot is flipping cool. Because the foot, it has to be uh, pliable so that it can adjust to the surface that it's on, and it also has to be rigid so that we can use it as a lever to push against the ground and propel ourselves forward. And it has to do all of that every step. So, and that's why when you look at individual, like for instance, prosthetic feet, you'll see that a lot of people have a very stilted, constrained gait because it doesn't have the malleability. The foot doesn't have the ability to move in the up and down, left and right, and forward and back motion like the a natural foot would. Uh, we haven't figured that out yet because the foot is very complex. You know, we've got almost like a universal joint right in front of where the your shin bones come down and break over the top foot bone, and then right in front of that, that's where that universal joint is. So so that's the first part of it. So when you um, when you break right, you kind of allow your foot to adjust to the surface, and then as you come back to the medial side of the foot, that's where the foot kind of locks and you're able to push against the ball of your foot and use your foot as a lever to propel yourself forward, which is awesome. Um, and that helps you. Now, if you do engage your foot when you walk, right now, a lot of people, depending on the shoes you wear and that kind of thing, a lot of people don't engage their foot when they walk. They just kind of let their forward motion carry them, and they don't drive off of their big toe and second toe and engage their foot. And you can kind of identify these individuals because they'll have a more pronounced heel strike, and the foot will be well in front of their body. When people do drive through their toe, that tends to propel their center of mass further forward and allows their center of mass to land right above their foot or closer to the foot so that you're actually loading the body the way the body is designed to be loaded.
Which it seems like a natural spring you're creating through the system.
Yes,
When you do on the heel, it's like a heavy kind of lumbering.
yes. And you have to climb up over it, you know,
Yeah.
so you're going to have a lot of, there's a, you now are pushing your body over your foot instead of bringing your foot under your body. It's a lot like the difference between walking on a treadmill versus walking over ground. When you walk on a treadmill, you want your foot to land out in front of you because the treadmill is going to bring your foot underneath your body. But when you drive through your foot, you're going to push your body through that next step. And so the pushing, you're handling the pushing of the treadmill that the treadmill usually does.
And because we're living in such little boxes and little rooms, it's almost an odd thing to think about putting the center mass ahead of you, like you'd run across the room. When you're getting up out of a chair to walk into the next room, and there's only about 4 or 5 steps required. I mean, you can see how this habit of lumbering around sort of kicks in. Or if you're outside and you're running, I think this is why a lot of people now start to think. It's certainly me. I like to incorporate sprints into my weekly practice or whatever, just to keep that natural thing going. Give your body, because if you can just be a weekend warrior and kind of run around the block or run a few miles and continue to lumber and heel strike, you see that a lot.
Yes.
It looks a little uncomfortable. A lot of runners. I hesitate to call it running. I don't think it's really running. Maybe.
Yeah, lumbering is a good word, but that's where we get into. This is another example of this idea where we try and cram things into these boxes that really doesn't have a box. And if we go by the actual definition of running, locomotion with a period of non-support where both feet are off the ground, technically, yeah, they're running. Okay,
Yeah.
they do that,
Oh yeah.
but
Okay. Okay.
are they really? Are they getting that experience that you're really trying to achieve with that particular motion?
Well, you're not getting that, or at least that spring force, like you said. Maybe we don't have a word for this. I guess maybe we need to come up with something for this type of motion.
Yeah.
Natural running, or I don't know.
Yeah, well, and you think about, you talk about Chris McDougall and Born to Run and Born to Walk and all of those guys, they talk about a lot of people and a lot of researchers also, they make this assumption that they're not even going to start with the foot. They're just going to look at the energy cost of moving the hip or the energy cost, the moment at the knee and that sort of stuff without considering that it's the foot to ground interface that is so critical. And that if you have a failed foot or an underdeveloped foot, that there's a lot of compensation that goes in to moving the tibia or the shin bone over the foot to be able to move people forward.
Yeah, even him with all of his barefoot stuff, he's not talking about that.
No, well, he was really talking about the individuals, right? And that experience. And that what was really interesting to them is it's not unlike the horses, right? So um a lot of horses will go lame the same way that humans go lame, where our navicular bone will drop. Well, horses' navicular bones drop as well. And a lot of people thinks it's because of the shoes, and not that they're shoed incorrectly, but that they're on these shoes, and then they don't challenge the foot in order for the materials of the bone or of the hoof to be able to withstand what we're asking it to withstand. So there was a gentleman who was in charge of the horses for a prince in Dubai, and he said he lets his horses go first thing in the morning, and they will cover somewhere between 10 and 17 miles a day, unshod, out in the sand or wherever they are, and they come back and they're great, and they don't break down. And but then you put these horses in shoes, and then you have them stand in a stall. Well, it's not unlike being a bedridden. You know, your bones are you're going to absorb the calcium from your bones. Your bones are going to become weaker, and that's what happens to the hoof of the horse. And they get laminitis. That's what it's called.
And so we're doing the same thing to ourselves.
I Yes, in some regards we are. And when I was a little kid, we spent a lot of time without shoes on.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time, and then when we did have shoes, we had the Stride Right Red Cross
Yeah.
white boots, and they held our foot, but there was nothing to the sole. It was a relatively thin sole, and all of that was a way to protect the outer surface of the foot, but still allow the forces to be transmitted to the sole of the foot, and the foot to be able to adapt to that ever increasing load that we were placing upon it. But now, and they're cute. I think they're awesome. The little baby Nikes and stuff. I think they're awesome. But we also need for the foot to spend some time interacting with the ground so that it continues to develop in the way that it's supposed to develop.
I'm assuming you don't walk around the university without shoes on.
No, that's a health code violation. So we're not allowed
Right.
to do that. Uh,
So we're locked in a little bit here. So what's your advice? How do we get around that? So how do we sort of do both?
oh, see, trap. What's your advice? Okay,
Oh,
so
sorry.
so here's the party line, right?
Yeah.
Um, you should wear the shoes that are most appropriate for your particular sole and foot condition.
Mhm.
There's my don't sue me words. Okay. Um, so one of the things that we really care about here when we evaluate somebody's foot is not just the shape of their foot, whether they're a high arch or low arch. Okay. People can, you can, that's great. What's more important to us is whether your foot is compliant. Okay. So what we do, if obviously we have a lot of technology here, but when we run labs and just for general information, what we'll do is we'll have people step in water and then and while they're sitting down, step in water and then step on a paper towel, and then you can see the shape of their foot. And then we take a second paper towel and we have them stand up. So we have them dip the foot in the water, put it on the paper towel and stand up, and then take their foot off the paper towel. And the difference between the two is what we call the compliance of the foot. How much how much does the foot collapse under the weight of the body? If it doesn't collapse at all, that's a high stiff arch, and you have that opening, that little curve on the medial border of your foot. Then you have that. That's where then you have a high rigid arch. That means that your foot is not helping you to interpret the environment, and it's just a pounding right up your body. Those individuals need cushioning. They also need to do some work on their foot so that their foot does become more compliant and they can interact with the environment. But at that point, in before they would get injured if they went directly to minimalist shoes or barefoot. So, and everything has to be done in moderation. Now, individuals with flat feet, if they get flatter when they stand on it, if their shape gets even wider, then that's not necessarily a bad thing because you still have some of that shock absorption kind of activity. And so now we again need to look at why is the foot shaped that way? Where'd the problem come from? Are they pronator or supinator? All of those things play a role in making that decision. I like personally, for me, I like minimalist shoes. I like to have the very little cushion between my foot and the floor. It allows me to interpret the surface better. It gives me the opportunity to try and grip the floor. Uh, all of those things are important to the way I walk because when you grip the floor and when you drive through your toes, you engage that posterior chain. Why is that important? Well, because it works on your posture. Why is that important? Well, it tucks your bum naturally, allows you to be in a more ergonomically appropriate arrangement of your body segments.
Yeah, so it's just outside, so we can take our shoes off at home and we can do some exercise. Well, whatever's appropriate for us. But I hear you saying even more is just the intelligence or the awareness of paying attention to the feet. Even if you're in a shoe, you can still actively use the foot and understand how it connects to the rest of the body. So that's a kind of a way to overcome. Sometimes we still have to wear shoes, and that's
Yes.
okay if we use our feet intelligently rather than just put shoes on them and forget about them.
Exactly. Yes, and it's even big when you're lifting.
Oh
So
yeah.
even if you're in lifting shoes where the soles are super rigid and again, the idea there is still to grip the sole of those shoes to the footbed of the shoes so that you can develop the tension in the posterior chain as well as the pelvic girdle stabilizers and allow you to be able to grip the ground and then drive through that.
All right, nice. We were talking a little earlier about the co-contraction.
Like everything else, there's in the world today, The answer is not uh, a 15-second soundbite. It's a much bigger story. So when we teach people how to run, one of the things that we do is we first work on the sound of their foot, how their foot interacts with the ground. And so we have them pound the ball of their foot into the ground. Then we have them bounce their foot off the ground. And it's the tension that's created in that foot that allows the foot to literally bounce off the ground so that it can take the energy of the collision and return the leg back off the ground. That's awesome. Okay. Well, that can then be expanded to using that whole co-contraction idea and those stabilizing muscles to the entire column of your body. And when you're in that position, you can then have co-contractions on both sides of the joint that prevents deformation. If you go on YouTube and you watch the Masai jump, or you watch Stephen Holmes, who is a world-class high jumper, you'll see that as they approach their jump, and when they leave the ground, or even when they land, or Stephen Holmes taking off, that landing before he takes off, or the Maasai when they land, there's very little deformation. So what they're doing is they're capturing that energy and resisting the deformation so that it's like dropping a a a stick on the ground, throwing a stick on the ground and having it bounce back up into your hand. That's what you're trying to do with your body. Well, how do you do that? Well, you do that by co-contraction, by by not letting the joint deform, by not letting your knee bend too much or your hip bend too much or even your ankle. But your ankle is important because that's where you're going to get your stability from. You're going to interpret that surface, make the proper adjustments to maintain your appropriate alignment of your center of gravity of your body over your base of support when you make contact.
And so when we talk co-contraction here, are we talking the deep axle muscles or superficial or the whole thing?
The whole kit and caboodle. So the what people don't appreciate, a lot of times when you're like, "Hey, look, I'm using my quads because I'm flexing and extending extending my knee." That's great, but what you don't appreciate is that there's two ends to that muscle. That muscle group has to be attached somewhere else. And if you're in open chain, if your foot is off the ground, when you're calling upon your knee extensors or your quads, not only are they pulling your shin up around your knee joint, but they're also trying to pull your trunk forward across the hip joint because the rectus femoris crosses the hip as well as the knee. And so it tries to shorten at both ends. It's trying to shorten towards its midpoint. And so when it does that, you need to stabilize the pelvis so that when you do go to extend your knee, you don't pull your pelvis forward. So how do you prevent that from happening? By using your posterior pelvic girdle rotators. So now you've got contraction, you've got contraction on both sides to cancel out the unwanted movement. We have the same thing in the arm, right? So if I'm going to do, so people call elbow flexion bicep curls, right? They call them bicep curls, right? Bicep curls are not bicep curls. The primary job of the bicep, because the bicep comes in and inserts on the medial border of the arm, what it wants to do first is supinate the forearm. That's what it wants to do. So if you're doing preacher curls, if you're doing reverse curls here, then what's happening is the bicep muscle has to it can play, it can become engaged, but only if the pronators are turned on. The amount of weight that you can reverse curl is actually dictated by how strong your pronators are to cancel out the motion that the bicep wants to put into play. So these co-contractions happen everywhere in the body to stabilize some joints that we don't want to move, resist deformation in other joints than we do want to move, and then some of them turn off with reciprocal inhibition when we're trying to achieve a specific motion at a specific joint.
And this all just happens naturally, or can we cultivate this?
Both. It really depends on the type of learner that you're dealing with and the type of individual. So I'm a visual kinesthetic learner first. Okay. So, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you a story. I met a person and they were trying to teach me how to say their name. And I was struggling because it was a Persian name. And we don't use our vocal cords the same way as individuals from that part of the world. So I was struggling with getting the right sound. And I said, "Could you say your name again for me, please?" And so he said his name, but when he said it, he kind of nodded when he said it. And I practiced what he was saying, and I realized that I was nodding every time that I was practicing it. So I picked up on his movement sense before I picked up on his auditory sound or sense. And so I found that that was a very big wake-up call for me about how I observe the world. And so, when it comes to can you cultivate this? Yes. How you cultivate that, that's dependent upon the type of learner and the type of teacher that have come together.
Well, yeah, because it seems like you said, we need this in running and sprinting and jumping. And if we don't do those activities very often, or if we haven't, if we're coming off the couch, this might be working our interest to learn how to regain that ability to co-contract because it might not be there for us if we haven't called on it.
Exactly. And so there's some people who have to do it to cultivate it.
Sure.
They have to put their body in that situation. The problem is that, particularly in this country, if a little is good, more is better. That's not the case.
Right.
And that's a big thing that happened with those Vibram five finger shoes.
Yeah.
People wanted to started running and then they were
Yeah.
shocked that they were sore and injured and all the rest of it. It's like, come on, people. It takes your body time to remodel. And that's the other thing that we have to appreciate is that after we exercise, it's the remodeling of our body that causes us to have hypertrophy, gain muscle, for our bone density to go up. All of those things happen after we do the workout. And we have to provide the body the opportunity because in the interim, you're weak. You're actually susceptible because the body has broken down. Now you're collecting all of those byproducts and bringing in the healing products and allowing that turnover to occur.
Oh, so that's really okay, good. I'm glad you said that. So recovery.
Mhm.
So when I was growing up in sports and athletics, we never talked about recovery ever.
Yep.
Um, so okay, what's I don't know if I want to say what your advice again. So maybe just
Yeah.
plain what is recovery? Why do we need it? And how do we recover? Like, I've, do we take a whole day off, 2 days off? Do we do light exercise? Or again, I know this is going to be individual. Uh,
Exactly. And it depends on what the goals are too, you
mhm.
know? So if you're trying to tear somebody down, like it and so like let's talk about weight training phases, right? So you have these phases that you might want to go through where you're building strength and then you're building power. And those are two different things. Okay. So um the way you're going so when you're building strength, that's when you're trying to tear things down. So repeated bouts of trying to kind of break down those muscle fibers so that they can rebuild bigger. Okay. So that you're going to have less you're going to have different rests. So you might do, for instance, you might work really hard on your legs 1 or 2 days a week. You might work really hard on your back and chest 1 or 2 days a week, and then you go through that cycle. But you have to now you can't just do that and then go, eat Tupperware or something. You need to give your body the nutrients it needs to rebuild that. Now, some people believe that whey protein is the way to maintain and rebuild those muscles, and there's plenty of research out on that, and that's beyond my scope. That's not my deal. But it's out there. Um, I like to look at it as a cycle where I build strength and then I build speed and then I build strength and then I build speed. So I'll lift to gain strength and then I want to go back to that lowest load that I was at and move it faster. And then once I can move that at the speed that I set for myself, then I'll add more weight and I'll meet that speed again and then I'll add more weight. Then the third phase of my lift is where I'll actually say, okay, I'm going to try and add a little bit of weight, not a lot. I'm not trying to go heavy and get crazy. But if I want to kind of maintain and try and stay in that zone a little bit, when I lift, if I can't meet that velocity that I'm trying to, then I'll go down in weight because maintaining the velocity is more important to me than building a lot of load. Because at that point, that's usually as I'm getting closer to the season and I'm trying to get ready to prepare to compete and that sort of stuff. So I need to be as fast, quick, and not be bogged down by heavy muscles, but be ready to use my muscles in a more explosive manner. So there's a lot of ways to approach that. And it depends on where you are in your cycle and what your goals are and all of those sorts of things. But the bottom line is rest is very important. And if you do work out super hard, it doesn't mean that you have to take the next day off because the last thing you want to do is lay there
You're
because
right.
in that remodeling, the muscle will remodel shorter or
Mhm.
in whatever position you're in. So you need to do something. You need to go out and move.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you're introducing movement every day.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think we can move every day. It's just how much effort we're putting into the we need to take lower effort days.
Yep. In the early 90s, the USA field hockey team was playing the World Cup in Ireland, and they were getting ready to play. I think they were playing 3 games every day for 3 days, which is an incredible load. And their strength coach said, "Okay, this is what we're gonna do." And so he took them out 3 days before the tournament started and depleted them, just completely depleted them. They had nothing left. And then he said, "Okay, nothing for the next 2 days. Nothing. Eat, sleep." And they were like, "We gotta do something." And they said, "Well, you can do whatever you want, but no time on your feet. Minimal time on your feet, minimum time doing anything." And they were fresh as a daisy for that 7th game. That was it. They ended up only having to play 7, but they said, "We could have played 3 more games." Um, and so but he had taken that wasn't a one-time a one-off, he was building them to that because he had a plan for that particular intervention, and they needed it because they were traveling and they had all that other stuff going on. So again, it's very particular to your situation, but recovery is very important.
Yeah, I don't feel like a lot of people have think about it. We don't have the patience for the recovery sometimes. We don't understand what's happening. And there's an adrenaline thing to movement every day.
Yes,
So the
very much
pushing
so.
hard becomes addictive and it's hard not to do it.
Yep, the endorphin rush.
Mhm.
Yep, you need that stimulus, and it's important, right? People that are connected to that, once they've got that consistency, they need it to sleep, they need it to move, they need it to wake up, they need all of those things that chemical reaction that happens in the body. But again, it goes back to this idea that just because you don't see things happening doesn't mean it's not happening,
Right.
and you need to have a little bit of patience, and you have to trust that your body is doing what it needs to do in order to get you to the next level.
Then there's a ingredient here about I feel like if we learn to listen to the body, the more we tap into the body, that's the only real way to know if what we need. And that's a skill in of itself. You got to develop that.
100%. And you become in tuned with it. You know when you feel good when you're moving, and when you don't feel good, you need to analyze that. And that's where we break down. That's where we're like, "Oh," because we've been taught that you don't want to be a wimp, you don't want to be a whiner. Something doesn't feel right, suck it up and run through it. Work harder, rub some mud on it, whatever your statement was that you grew up with. And that's kind of the detrimental side. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be um, that you accept every uh, setback as a career-ending experience. But you do need to listen to your body and address that and think, okay, what did I do? What am I not doing? Am I out of alignment? Is my posture bad? Is my form bad? Am I overstriding? Am I understriding? Did I do too much? And doing too much doesn't mean do nothing the next day. Doing too much just means dial it back a little bit, you know, and rebuild that. You gotta give your body the opportunity to recover. And as we get older, that window of recovery needs to be a little bit longer.
Well, I like what you were saying there, like the next day, like posture, stride, like there's an investigation aspect here where we're constantly investigating, retooling, going back at it. And then it's also going to be very different if we're a competitive athlete versus somebody who's just maintaining health and longevity and working on our own individual goals.
100%, 100%. And that whole idea of, you should be checking yourself every day because your body and your brain will get used to certain things and it's going to be easier. And you might not notice that you're maybe 1 or 2 degrees further forward today than you were yesterday, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a new posture and you have to retrain yourself to engage that body, you know? And when I'm working with individuals, I tell them to use their wait time. So when they're cooking dinner, or peeling potatoes or whatever they're doing, check yourself, check your posture. Stand on one foot and see where your center of gravity is. See if your body changes. Does your hip drop? Do your shoulders drop? Does your head turn? What happens to your arms? And then when you move your arms to do things, brush your teeth, mouthwash, whatever you're doing, all of those are opportunities for you to check in on your body and say, "Hey, where am I at? Do I have is my pelvis in a good position? Is my belly button going to my spine? Is my are my shoulder blades drawn together? Do I feel strong? Do I feel like I'm in a good strong position?" Um, and it's just an opportunity for you to check on your when you're waiting for your Keurig to give you your coffee, you know? It literally, what is that, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever? Just check in with your body. All of those things, all of those little opportunities, waiting in line to check out. Check yourself, you know? Stay off your phone because your phone's gonna make you crunkle over.
Yeah, I love that. So that's very somatic. I talk about this all the time. Because to me, that's the real test. It's like, how are you behaving in the mundane life? Because that's where we spend most of our time.
Exactly.
And if we're all jacked up in that situation, that becomes the habit.
Right.
And I also like what you're saying because you're saying ask questions. There's not this imposing. It's a question, like which really help forges the relationship between the body and the mind.
Yes, exactly. And again, we do that when we talk to our feet. If we're to bring this full
Ah,
circle,
oh,
when we talk about these individuals that maybe wear, and I'm not saying hokas are bad. I'm not saying that out of bounce are bad. I'm not saying that at all. But when you spend a lot of time in that, if you've lost connection with your feet, try just to curl your toes and extend your toes. And if
mhm,
you can't do that on demand when you want to, then you need to spend some time talking to your toes.
yeah,
Flare your toes out, bring your toes in.
mm,
Pick up your big toe and leave your other toes down. Drop your big toe and bring your other toes up while your foot stays on the ground. All of those are things you can do to engage the foot musculature and get your brain to talk to your feet again.
mhm. Yeah, wonderful. You keep talking about the posterior chain, the pelvis, and the belly button. We dig into this because this seems right up my alley here.
Okay. Um,
So,
so go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Nope, you go first.
Well, the belly button sometimes is an interesting one because people don't all belly breathe and this sort of thing. If you pull the belly in, then they call it reverse breathing, which sounds very dubious.
Yeah,
So I just because what I see is a lot of people walking around with pelvic tilt. So
right.
maybe you can just explain this.
Sure. So a lot of times when we sit down and we have been spending a lot of time sitting, we've gone from an agrarian economy to more of a, a postmodern economy where we spend a lot of time sitting. And what that does is that shortens the muscles that go from your pelvis to your thigh. And so when you stand up, they pull you into anterior pelvic girdle rotation, and your hamstrings are longer, or your butt muscles are longer, so they're going to let that happen. What you want to do is you want to bring your pelvis back underneath your spine, because when your pelvis goes forward, it increases the lordosis of your lower back, or that curve of your lower back. And when that happens, it thrusts you forward, and now your chest is sticking out. And because you need to see the world around you and maintain your balance by having your vision look up, now you have to extend your neck more. So now you've kind of gotten out of the normal spinal curvatures that you have when you stand over your your column, so to speak.
It's more straight
Yes.
instead of these
Yep.
great big curves.
That's right. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that your, we call them the elephant ears sometimes, but the of your pelvis, those big elephant ears, you want them to be up so that they're underneath your body and not trying to tilt you forward. When you tilt yourself forward, you're going to send your center of gravity forward. When you send your center of gravity forward and you stand on one leg, you're going to feel like you're falling forward. And so you have to get that foot out fast. As we get older, that becomes more and more difficult, and we catch our toes on things more and more often. And so that can precipitate slip, trips, and falls because you're being asked to move that foot forward more rapidly than you are comfortable doing. So by tucking I talk about tucking my bum. So when I think about it, I take my pelvis and I rotate it backwards, and I do it. I do the two things I keep in my head are pull my pelvis back and externally rotate my femurs while my feet stay in the exact same place. And that also pulls my arch up, that pulls my tibias or my shin bones into the right orientation. My femurs are more they're actually further away from the midline. So as women we have our femurs are wider apart at the top, and so that gives us a more natural alignment. And when initially, when you feel it, you're going to feel smaller muscles work very hard. And they're going to say, I don't want to do this. So just hold it for, a count to 20 and relax. And then do it again. And the idea is that you're going to build up these smaller muscles to support this whole posterior chain column.
So this becomes like a practice, and this is going to take some time.
100%. And that's the thing, we are Americans. We all want the $1,000,000 pill. We want the pill that will make us lose weight and be perfect and look great. We want the pill that we can take once a day that will fix all of our ailments and we'll never get arthritis. We want the pill that will fix our digestion and our biome, our gut biomes, and all of these things. It doesn't exist. It's a series. It's a symphony. And if the drums are too loud, then you're going to wreck the song. Not that the drums are bad. I'm a drummer myself, okay? But you want to make sure that everybody is contributing to the overall symphony that is your body.
And so much more interesting when we see things like this as process.
Yes, yes. And you got and reward yourself for those. That's the thing, is that we all want this big achievement. And you know what? A big achievement is after many, 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 many steps. And that's why when you put in the effort and you work towards those things, that's where the gift is.
I know it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
we always forget.
But you want to enjoy both. I don't think the destiny is the enemy. The
No.
destiny is the vision. That's the
Yeah,
vision.
yeah.
But you've got to appreciate the steps to get there. When you go to work every day, you might be thinking about retirement, but that could be 20 years off. You know what? You're putting a little bit away today and a little bit away today and a little bit away today. And then all of that grows. That was the whole point of the allowance we got as kids, right? You saved up for that bike. You saved up for your first phone. You saved up for whatever it was, your Xbox,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you know? Yeah. But it's all of those things of delayed gratification makes you savor the small steps, because even the small steps are a victory.
Right. Well, and yeah, and that's how I was thinking when you were saying that about uh, cooking or waiting for the coffee to brew. It's like those are the small steps,
Exactly.
but it
So
does take. Go ahead.
we were taught on what's important now. How do you win? By doing what's important now. WIN. And so by keeping that in your forehead, what's important now? What are you gonna do right now that's going to A, get you closer to your goal, and B, be one thing better that your opponent isn't doing, you know? And that can be anybody. And your opponent doesn't even need to be real, you know? Your opponent could be failure. So you're because the failure's waiting at the door. And all failure has to do is wait. That's all they have to do. Success you gotta go get.
Yeah, I like that your word, that the the success or the opponent is yourself.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be an external thing.
So when I very, very, very first started my martial art training, I had gone to my classes and I could do all of the skills that were required for the test. And of course, in my athletic brain, I was like, I can do them all better than these people. So it came time for testing, and my master said, "No, you're not ready." And I was like, "Okay, this is a humbling experience. I'm supposed to go through this. That's okay." So I went through it again, and I did my whole thing. Came up for the next round of testing, and I wasn't on the list again, and I said, "Sir, I don't understand." And I said, "I can do all of the tasks you want me to do. I can do them better than any of my other classmates, so why can't I test?" And he said, "Is it the best you can do?" And I said, "Thank you, sir." And that was the biggest lesson that, and it's cliche, don't measure yourself against other people because there will always be people better than you and always be people less than you or less talented, less gifted, whatever the word is you want to use. Okay. But are you the best that are you doing this job the best that you can do it? Are you the best you can be? Because the world only works if we all rise to our gifts. The world is a better place when we can all contribute to the where we're supposed to be, that we're doing what we're supposed to do. We're contributing to the fabric the way we're supposed to. If you're not contributing to the best of your ability and the way you're supposed to be doing it, then you're not helping the greater good, in my opinion.
No, 100% I agree. That it's the idea of being the interconnectedness, and sometimes the competition makes that an unhealthy thing. But when we work, when we use competition, what I would say correctly, right?
Yes,
But we're trying to use it to help develop ourselves. It's not only to beat somebody else, but it's recognizing it's helping push my own thing. But if we really get like what you're saying, these really disciplined martial arts, when that almost all goes away, it's like you're really just working on yourself. Then you really get this idea of how you contribute in a much more positive way because it requires mindfulness, right?
exactly.
Showing up
And
every moment.
and your your goal truly is to elevate other people, not just yourself, but elevating and that's something that even in my research lab, we truly believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you help somebody else get better, they're going to help you get better. And that we just need to continue to row in the same direction, but we will all get better together.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that might be a great place to end.
Okay, bud. I
That's
got a little off the biomechanics track there, but it's still all been there.
No, I thought, no, that's great. You brought that because the somatics, we're trying to bring those two things together.
Yes.
And a lot of times, though, I see in the somatics, it's got so docile in some ways, where there's really no oomph
Yes.
and there's no bringing each other up because everybody just becomes so kind of, I don't know what I want to say, like relaxed like a puddle,
Yes.
where there's not a lot of rigor or vigor or vitality. Sometimes there's a loss of vitality. We go too much the other way, then it just becomes dominate and destroy the opponent. So
Right.
trying to find that middle ground, that self-discipline of that middle ground is a task in and of itself.
100%. And one of the arts that I trained was in Tai Chi after my hard art, which was Taekwondo,
Mm.
was Tai Chi. And it was initially when I started to train, I was like, oh, all right, this is okay. Woohoo. And as I started to get into it more, I realized how the Tai Chi was actually a great recovery from my harder art of Taekwondo, and
Mhm.
B, the allowed me to use my body in a way that made me more efficient and effective in my Taekwondo. And it was all, and that I could be very, very strong while being very fluid in the Tai Chi world.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I agree. When I was asking you about recovery, that's what I my mind always goes to. I do my qigong practices to recover in a lot
yes,
of ways. Like if I can't do hard stuff that day, then immediately I go to the tai chi, and then that's a more introverted but introspective, how biomechanical observation, center of mass. It's like I can work on these subtleties, and then when I go out for the sprint or do some jumping or whatever, it's there for me. So these two support each other constantly.
exactly right. And it again, that whole give and take, and using. And then it goes back into the fascia, right? So those long, slow movements that are associated with the more passive arts, or apparently passive arts, allow that the blood flow to get into the muscle and into the joints and into the fascia, that allows the nutrients to get in, the oxygen to get in, and bring healing things to those sites, and collect the byproducts of the damage that you did the day before. And so it's all of that motion. And we've talked about the fact that fascia can get sticky, but by long gentle motion with it, then that hyaluronic acid doesn't get doesn't get locked down. It actually can continue to flow, which is how the muscles can slide past each other and we feel better and all those sorts of things.
All right. Okay, good. Since you brought it up, that's wonderful. So we do the more aggressive workouts, the more demanding practices, and then we go to our Tai Chi, Qigong practices. We actually have an opportunity to remold the fascia with the hyaluronic acid through these gentle, slow remodel. It's actually remodeling, right?
Well, it's the flow of nutrients through our systems, the lymph system, the Bongon or the primavascular system, the through the fluid that's in the interstitial tissues in between the muscles, the bones, and the skin, uh, and muscles. The all of those things in that long, low, slow kind of motion allows the the blood flow and the system to flow, and the movement of that fluid allows the other fluid to get out of the way so that healing can occur.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think a lot of people sometimes box all these things up, but traditionally, when you would practice these arts in China, you would have your slow, but then aggressive, and then fast. There was bounce, there was hops. The whole system was really intact. Where I feel like sometimes we get bits and pieces, so we think, oh, Tai Chi is just really slow moving. People forget that it's also has a martial art. That really the root of it is a martial art, and so
100%.
of course there's playing with other people where you're pushing on each other and fighting, and there's all this other aspects of it. It's not just these slow movements people think it is.
No, and one of the coolest parts of Tai Chi is that the closed hands, where you're actually in contact with the other person and you can sense what they're going to do. But how do you sense? Through your contact. So it's only engaging with with your senses that you can engage with that other person and sense what they're going to do. And when my taekwondo master was from Korea, and so every week our training, we would go super hard earlier in the week, and then we would practice forms and set movements at the end of the week. So it was always that ebb and flow of give and take. And so sparring was on this day, workout was on that day, and forms were on this day. And so that you had that opportunity to recover and come back and be better the next week.
So I didn't know you did Tai Chi. How long is this a life? Have you been doing this for a long time? You did?
Yes, actually, so my doctoral advisor was from China, and his mother was a Tai Chi master. Uh, and so she came and taught us, the Yang short form, and we practiced that, and it is. When I sat too long, I'll get up and, put on a 5-minute piece of music and time myself on doing that is just enough to break up the stiffness of my body. So, but but sticky hands, we would do a lot of that. And she would do a sword form every morning at 6 o'clock in the driveway. And I think she was 73, and unbelievable, just simply unbelievable. And there's there's a book called The Supple Leopard, and every time I saw her move, that's what I was thinking, you know? I mean, it's the suppleness of her body, even at 72.
That's wonderful. That's the goal, right? Tai Chi, they talk the Dantian. It's like the center of the body.
Obviously, we talked about the center of the body because we talked about that how that moves, right? And collecting the energy and being able to feel that energy and move in that direction, but always being conscious of where your center is and where your basis of support is. What's funny to me is when you lift and when you're doing more of the being more aggressive and more strong, you're really thinking about the external. You're thinking about moving the load, and you have to really go back to concentrate on engaging the body to be able to lift the load, not just lift the load. And so and Tai Chi helps me to think about my body more. It slows it down for me.
Yeah, I always so if you see this lady moving, she's doing her Tai Chi in sword form. I always feel like, part of what I'm always trying to suss out is, you know, ancient Chinese way to talk about the body and cultural, and it's just going to be different. And they're not going to have words like uh, our base support, center of
Right.
mass. And so I am always like, is this it? Is it similar? Are they talking about the same thing but calling it different names? Like, trying to sort of make that a little more clear to bridge this dialogue.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I was talking to some old Russian people,
Hmm.
and I had met them on a Friday afternoon, and I said, "So, what are you doing for fun for this weekend?" And they turned to each other and they spoke for a second, and they turned back to me and they said, "We don't have a word in our vocabulary for fun like that, like just frivolous fun."
Yeah.
And I was like, that was the first time that I was like, wow, because I just again, this American brain that we get ingrained with,
Hmm.
we think everybody just has the exact same words that we have that and they just speak it in a different they have a different
Right.
verbiage and
Yeah.
it's not their words actually mean different encapsulate
Yes.
different different essences and it's
Yes.
in those nuances that the answers are in.
Yes. Oh, I love to hear you say that. Yeah, I'm totally on board. And just this idea of like when we say, we have a concept of the body. It's like you're talking to some practitioner or master from a different country who's doing body movement practices, and their fundamental concept of their body is different than yours.
Yes.
And to assume it's the same is your first misstep. And if you never question that, you're going to just have one long journey of missteps because you didn't get the fundamentals sussed out.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I was forever grateful for my taekwondo master because staying at that lower level allowed me to truly master the foundation. So as I progressed, I could build upon those things and realize because the people that had progressed, they were they had not fully gained their balance. They had not fully gained the body position or the loose and firm method or any of those sorts of things that I got to practice at a very low level and then incorporate as I continued to move on. So it was a tremendous gift, even though for so many reasons, right? Not only from a movement perspective, but from a humility perspective, and also from a recognizing my place in the world perspective.
Hmm. You had a really good teacher. You got really fortunate.
Yes, I did. Yes, I very much did.
All right. Well, this was wonderful. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate the opportunity. I hope that this was helpful and informative.
Yeah. Thanks, Wendy. I appreciate it.
No problem, buddy. You take care.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.